Welcome to The Beautiful Side of Grief, your go-to podcast if you're wanting to hear from people who have moved through heart-wrenching loss or those who are at the coalface supporting the process. It's diverse, heartwarming, though most of all it is positive and filled with go-tos that you can use yourself. I'm your host, Helen Morris, and I'm a health professional turned energy healing practitioner after I lost my only child and daughter, Tal, in a car accident in 2017. I want to use my own unique experience with loss to help you navigate your journey. You will hear from grief coaches, mediums, authors, first-hand loss accounts, plus many, many more. I'll put the links to any free resources in the episode notes. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can keep informed of each weekly episode. So now grab a pen and paper if you want to jot things down. Sit back and relax as we navigate the beautiful sides of grief.
Spiritually. So I would love to introduce you to them as well.
Wow, absolutely. And because you know what, I was trying to promote this more on Facebook platforms and groups. But honestly, you get shut down so very quickly if you seem to be promoting anything. And so I had an amazing reaction from this group, and there was such a need for people to be wanting to tune in and hear what comes across this platform. However, the admin people said, no, because I'm associated, I've got my own business, an energy healing business. And because this is coming under that, they said, no, we think that you'll be selling to, parents and, so we can't have that. And it was interesting because I feel like a lot of these platforms are actually not allowing really good resources or really good ideas to be able to filter through for people to see what is available, because many people don't know what they don't know. So they don't know how to reach out. And this is why your A to Z is, I love it. I love it. Like I went into D and I was going, oh my gosh, I love the resources there. And, I was busy looking at those. And then I was going, okay, what are my favorite
right.
letters?
Which letters?
So
E for energy therapies, right? So.
Oh, wow. Yes. And my daughter guided me to that so that I could help heal myself, because I'd come from a long history of trauma, right from my childhood. So within 3 days, I taught myself how to muscle test, and, I downloaded a podcast, and I had this Dr. Bradley Nelson talking about the emotion code and the body code. And then there was a free download of the energy of the emotion code. So I downloaded that and I taught myself how to muscle test. I kid you not, within 3 days, for the first time ever in my life, I felt calm, I felt peaceful, I felt strong.
Oh,
and that was just from releasing grief and resentment and anger, and all those wonderful emotions.
Right.
And,
so how do you promote your podcast? I don't have a podcast of my own. I'm just wondering, how do you?
Well, because that's what I'm doing is just, getting everybody to share. I'm sharing on my Facebook, but I'm working on, like what I would do is I do graphics that I send out with the link to the podcast so that you have that in advance, so you can share that out to your groups. And then I just want to get this momentum happening of people talking and sharing. And because I spoke to a psychotherapist the other day who lost her 3-year-old in the pool, and when she looked for her daughter, she was right there beside her in the pool down the bottom, and she has no idea how that happened, no idea. But she is like, wow, so inspiring. And again, she just was saying, you can't stay stuck. You have a choice. You're suffering.
Right.
You can be a sufferer where, you can sort of revel in the pain, or you can
for years. You can do that forever, right?
Wow, yes. And some people do that. Or you can choose to serve others and actually go out and honor whoever it is you've lost. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So are you actually happy talking about how your husband passed?
Yep.
You're okay
I
with
do this
that?
for a living now. So I work, well, I'll tell you as we go along what I
Yeah.
do for work, but all day long, I'm talking
All
about
the
it.
Fantastic. I love that. Okay, so shall we just get right into it? So let me tell you, I'm going to do a pre-recorded session just on your intro, which is going to read like this. So, what does one do after hopes, dreams, assumptions, and core beliefs have been shattered? In this episode, we're talking to an inspiring individual, Susan Hannifin McNab, whose life took a dramatic turn in 2012 with the sudden loss of her bagpiper-surfer-professor husband. With a master's in social work, the path this young mum and widow took over the following years led her to realize that the tools and resources she was using to help herself and her son could also help others. And so was born the A2z Toolbox workshops. In 2018, she wrote the book A2z, A Practical Guide for Navigating Grief and Trauma with Intention, which went on to receive numerous accolades, and the A2z Toolbox being featured by a number of organizations. An active participant in the grief healing community, she also leads workshops, trainings, and personal development classes. She lives in San Diego with her son, therapy dog, and an inspirational community of peers, mentors, and supporters. And just before we get chatting with Susan, as always, I'm hugely appreciative of you for listening into this episode. You are the reason podcasts work, so thank you. So that's what I'm going to pre-record and just tag
I love
in.
that.
Okay, so do you like that? Good. And so let's start. So a very warm welcome, Susan. Great to have you chatting with me today around what led you on this incredible journey that eventually focused on helping others with their own grief experiences.
Well, Helen, it's great to be here with you. And I will say that I had no intention of being a grief and trauma educator or someone that speaks about grief and trauma healing. I was a social worker and educator for 20 years, happily working with children, youth, and families. I got married to a professor of international business, which took my life to Canada, Australia, and Hawaii.
Wow.
Really tough places to go. Right. And we had our son who was born in Australia. His name is Jacob. And when Jacob was 5, we decided to come back to the US mainland to get resettled. And we were back in San Diego for a month when Brent went out for a drive in the local mountains and never returned. So for 2 weeks, we had no idea where he was. And that is why the trauma piece is in my book and my workshops, because when you have someone missing in action or you have a profound trauma experience, not only do you have the grief when you learn someone has died, like I did 2 weeks later, and you have the grief and the trauma together. So after I was told by the medical examiner that they had found a car down in a ravine in this beautiful mountainside area, that's when I became a sudden widow and mother to a 5-year-old son, and had no idea what to do, where to go, or how to even understand the world anymore, really.
Oh my gosh. And I can't even begin to imagine what those 2 weeks must have been like for you, because, with my own daughter, it was an accident that I knew about almost straight away, like within the hour of it happening. So to go 2 weeks without knowing what had happened must have just been unimaginable. Everything going through your head, and then having a 5-year-old to sort of still keep things together for. My heart goes out to you on that.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes, you're welcome. And I think it's very, very important for our listeners to be hearing your story because so often, that grief and trauma do go hand in hand. I'm hearing more and more of people that are losing their loved ones to, suicide, to murders, to shootings, to other episodes that are just we just think would never ever happen to us, and suddenly you've been faced with these events. So yes, I can
Exactly.
understand you not knowing how to navigate it either. So you were left a young mum with a young child. Share how those initial weeks, months, years were for you.
Well, like all of us who have a grief or trauma story, it's unfathomable and it's unimaginable. And it's really, I describe it as a dark pit. Imagine a well that I just tripped and fell down, 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 down into the deepest, darkest well with no
Yeah,
light whatsoever. And, eventually, after sitting down there for what seemed like decades, I realized, oh, I have a child. I need to do something. I have to make sure this child has a childhood. And because I was a teacher and educator for so long, my heart really is all about children. And
yeah,
so I knew that I needed to save him and rally for him. I didn't care about myself anymore. But
yeah,
in rallying for him and caring for him, I wound up getting help for myself as well. So lots of shock and denial and anger and, all the 20,000 different emotions. But at the end of the day, it was, what am I going to do to help my son? And then realizing I've got to be well in order to care for him. So let's go get some resources and some help.
yeah. And so good you mentioned that too, because sometimes when people listen to this, they think, oh, all right for you, you're a social worker, so you had the tools to suddenly, deal with this experience and be able to overcome it. But in reality, it doesn't matter what you've got behind you. Grief and trauma have a way of just wiping the slate clean, and then you're having to find your way out again. And
Yes, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because I stumbled upon my graduate school files from my master's of social work program, and I have a file in there on grief. I took that
oh,
entire thing and I threw it away because that stuff I learned in school was very over there. It was very methodical and mechanical, and it was very professional, but it wasn't my personal story. Not until I had a personal story and I could actually see and feel what grief is and was and could be, did I start to then turn on the social worker brain and go, okay, whew, now what am I going to do? I've been helping other people for decades. Now I need to help myself. I've been gathering resources for other people for decades. Now I need to gather them for myself and my child. So
yeah.
that's how that started.
Yeah, and that's what prompted you to develop the A2Z toolbox, isn't it? To help others who were experiencing the same thing. And was it something that evolved, like you knew right from the beginning that that's what you wanted to do when you realized that your own previous version of how to handle grief needed to be chucked out? Or was it something that after you got all these resources together, then you began to realize, actually, I think others can benefit from this?
It's the latter. I had
Mhm.
no intention of writing a book. I had no intention of speaking about grief and trauma healing. What happened was very accidental, or some folks may say it was very purposeful, but I don't know. There wasn't one particular day that I said, oh my gosh, let me do this. What happened was I am a teacher. So in addition to being a social worker and gathering resources, I needed to combine these resources in some sort of organized fashion. So I got a 3-ringed notebook and I punched holes in all my resources for therapists, for groups, for different books I had read about. And I put all of these resources in a binder. Well, then I needed to alphabetize that binder. So A became animals. My son and I were both working with dogs in therapy. And B became breath work. And I had to learn how to breathe again because I couldn't. I had so much anxiety.
Yes.
So A, B, C, D, E, it became what I called originally, gosh, this is an alphabet of healing. And then I got involved with a wonderful organization called Soaring Spirits International, which is a global support network for the widow community. And we have 3 conferences per year called Camp Widow. And there was no way I wanted to go to anything called Camp Widow because I didn't like that word and I didn't want to be associated with that word. But I eventually went and I started providing workshops at Camp Widow. And the very first workshop I presented, I printed out a booklet for each of the 25 people in my workshop, and each booklet had 26 pages. A for animals, B for breath work, C for counseling, and here are some resources. So I handed these out, and then the workshop attendees looked at me and said, "Where did you get this information?" And I said, "Well, these are all the resources I've been using." And some I knew about because I was a social worker, different therapies. And they said, "Well, you've got to put this into a book." And I said, "No way. There's no way. A book? Are you out of your mind? That is not what I had. That is not what was on my mind whatsoever." But that was the first group of people that said to me, "This is really valuable information and we need it." So that's how it began. It was very organic, and it took a lot of people to convince me that this actually needed to be published.
Oh, I love that. And I love the fact that you're both an educator and a social worker. And so the combination of both meant you were so equipped to do this. And it's all evidence-based information that you're sharing. And so what a fantastic resource to develop. And I guess, that is the basis why it's been so well acclaimed and widely recognized, especially in mental health arenas and areas like that, isn't it? Because people probably desperately needed something that covered a bit more than just counseling, or a bit more than just breath work, a bit more than just, working with animals. It needed to be a whole A to Z of things.
Yes. So I was of the mindset that, and I still am, we all have a unique journey. We all have unique personalities, and we all have different strengths and strength areas that we gravitate toward. So I didn't want to write a book just about my story. Actually, I didn't have anything about my story. I was just giving resources. And then the publisher said, "Hi, we need a little bit of your story." So the book is really 28 chapters. There's a chapter on grief, and what is it? Common grief reactions. It's a book you can write all over. I have spaces in there for writing. There's a chapter on trauma. What is it? Common trauma reactions in adults. And then the 26 chapters, A, B, C, D, E, all the way to Z or Z. And in each chapter, there's just a page or two about how I use the tool for my own healing. But also in the book are the why. Why do animals help human physiology? Well, they decrease our depression. They decrease our anxiety. They bump up our levels of oxytocin and dopamine. I didn't make these things up, right? Doctors have been prescribing animals as therapeutic modalities for decades. Yeah. And then each chapter also has some single small action steps people can take if they choose to integrate that particular letter into their life. And also stories from other people, bereaved parents, bereaved siblings, bereaved spouses who have actually used that tool in their own healing. So it's not just my story, it's resources, it's the mental health aspect, and it's a variety of people saying, hey, I tried this. And I think that's why the book has won 5 awards, because so many people can access it. The mental health community likes it because there are resources in there, and there are references in there to articles and scientific research. So it's kind of a book that the mental health community can use, and any one of us can use who has a grief or trauma experience.
Yes, yes, that's so wonderful. So you talk about there being 5 positive pillars being needed to reclaim your life, if we want to phrase it like that. So can you share with us what those 5 pillars are and why they are needed?
I can. So what you're referring to, I believe, are the 5 pillars of post-traumatic growth. And the theory of post-traumatic growth came out of University of North Carolina. There were a couple of researchers working with a large group of bereaved parents. And they noticed over time that a huge majority of these bereaved parents were growing in amazing ways. So post-traumatic growth is the flip side of post-traumatic stress, or PTSD, as we know. So on one side of the coin is PTSD. We all know that. On the other side is PTG. And most of us don't know about the G, which is the growth. So the growth, so the growth happens, it can happen in 5 distinct areas. And I use the acronym OASIS. OASIS. We can actually have an oasis in post-traumatic growth after the death of a loved one. So the O stands for opportunity. We can have amazing new opportunities like this podcast you're doing right now, Helen. I mean, this is not something you did when your daughter was still here physically, but this is a beautiful new growth opportunity for you in your life.
Yes.
And many people, so I think the listeners who are hearing this right now can maybe think about, is there an opportunity that has come my way? Is there a new person that has come my way to have a new relationship with someone? So O is the first piece of post-traumatic growth. Letter A stands for appreciation. Many of us appreciate the small things in life much more than we ever did before our person died. That could be looking at the mountains, appreciating your dog, appreciating a friendship, appreciating just breathing and being alive. So the depth of appreciation can go much deeper.
Yeah.
So that's O and A. The third letter in OASIS would be S. And S stands for strength, inner strength. Many people, when they come out of the post-traumatic stress period, they can grow into a person that has much more inner strength than they did before their loved one died. And that could be seen as, in my case, I've lived through that hell. I can do anything. Bring it on, bring it on.
Exactly. That was my catch call. After Tal died, I went, okay, guys, all the little stuff I worried about does not matter anymore, because nothing can beat this. Nothing can top this now. So bring it on. And that actually was so, so liberating and freeing.
Yes. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. The fourth letter is I, and that stands for improved relationships. We can have improved relationships with others, total strangers. I mean, I'm enjoying this conversation with you, and it's a new opportunity, and we may stay connected for years to come.
Yeah,
so there's an improved relationship that's not to say that our relationships don't get altered as well when our person dies. If we're a couple, we're not part of a couple anymore. If we're a parent and our child's not here, it's hard to see the other kids her age moving forward in their physical life. So those are definite challenges, but there can also be improved relationships with total strangers or people who are already in your life.
Yeah.
And then the last piece, the last pillar of post-traumatic growth would be S for spirituality. And for many people, spirituality can change, deepen, grow in a completely new direction. Mine has changed and completely gone in a different direction, but it's much deeper now than it was before Brent died.
Yes, I agree with you there too. On the last 2 points, so very strongly, because for the I actually started doing volunteer work. So I got introduced to this world of opera that I'd never really been exposed to before. And I just met the most fabulous people who I'm still in contact with today. So yeah, I like the I. And then with the spirituality, yes, again, my life is, chalk and cheese in that regard. I've just growing so much in that regard, just thinking about life, thinking about what it means, thinking about what it is to lose somebody. And yet I still feel her very strongly with me. So that's made me also explore that side of things perhaps a bit more than I would have. So wonderful,
Right.
wonderful acronym. So that's OASIS. So fantastic. And what I will do is have a chat with you to see if we can just get a summary of that we can perhaps put as a link for people to access, when,
Sure.
in the notes. So that would be wonderful. So you've got the book. Now, you've also got a free online toolbox as well that people
Correct.
can access. Is that right? So
Yes.
that covers the A to Z. And as I was telling you earlier, I'd already sort of sussed out what my favorite letters were. So.
Oh, good. Everybody has a few favorites.
Yeah, so E for energy, because I'm doing energy healing. F for flowers. I absolutely have to have flowers around me. I love flowers. H for a higher power help. Yeah, I'm right into that. Give me some divine intervention here, please. M for meditation, and V for volunteering. So those were, my immediate go-tos. But I'd love you just to share a bit more about it. You've already mentioned about the grief resources that are in under D and doing your homework, where you can actually see where you're at. So I like how you've provided this list that can actually cater for wherever anyone is at in their particular stage of grief, and whether it's emotionally, physically, spiritually, socially, wherever. So this is something that anyone experiencing loss can check out straight away, isn't it? They don't have to wait until they're at a certain point. They can dive straight into it, can't they?
Yes, they can. And because I'm a social worker and I'm all about helping people, I wanted to make sure there was an online toolbox for folks who maybe didn't, they're not readers. Their brain can't handle much. And actually, I wrote the book in very succinct, short chapters so that the grief brain can manage. You can just open it to any page and start there. But there is an online toolbox. So if people go to the website A2Z healingtoolbox.com, and then they go to the online toolbox, they'll see all the letters there. They can click on, let's take one of yours, flowers and fragrance. They click on letter F, and then right away it talks about the why. Why do flowers and fragrance help human physiology? And then there are resources right there.
Yes.
So there are 4 worksheets on the website that people can actually print out. And the 2 that you saw are under letter D. One is called What's in Your Trauma Bucket, and one is What's in Your Grief Bucket. And if people click on try those activities under letter D, they can print out common grief and trauma reactions socially, emotionally, behaviorally, um, spiritually. There's so many different reactions that we have when we're going through this process. So people can actually circle, print those out, circle those, and just make note. Maybe 95% of those reactions they have in early grief or early trauma stages, but then circle again 6 months later, 8 months later, 12 months later, and we won't have those for the rest of our lives. There are also 2 other worksheets. One is under letter K for knowing your new environment. There's something there called an echo map. An echo map is a map of your environment. And if people click on that, they will get a sample echo map and directions on how to understand their new social life, their new world, really. And then the last worksheet is under letter O for organizing your supports, under people who can be there for you, people who can do things for you, and then maybe people that are just really challenging for you right now, and you need to put them on the shelf. I call it put them on the shelf. If you were friends with somebody for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and their anxiety is making you more anxious, or their questioning of your behavior or your journey is making you upset, maybe it's time to just put them on the shelf for a minute, take a break. You can always take them back off. But I like to talk a lot about navigating the new social world, which happens when a loved one dies. So those are 4 worksheets people can pull right from the website.
That is fantastic. And I will have a link to that website in the episode notes. So if you're wanting to access that, that will be right there for you to go straight into. And incredible resources. I just loved reading them. Like, you really have done a superb job in laying them out so that a grief brain can manage it, because I don't know, if you haven't suffered grief, you don't know that you actually tend to start living in a fog world, don't you? That's how feels like you've got cotton wool in your brain, and it takes you, twice as long to do anything or remember something. And yes. So incredibly well done, and very, very deserving of all the accolades and awards you've received for them. So what other projects are you involved in?
Well, there are a couple that I'm involved in weekly and daily, actually, sometimes. So I mentioned Camp Widow, and I mentioned that it's run by an organization that supports the global widowed community. That organization is called Soaring Spirits International, and I am now the programs and education manager for Soaring Spirits International. So we have so many programs running for widowed people worldwide, of any age, any sexual orientation, any race. If you are living without the person you thought you were going to spend the rest of your life with, then we consider you a widowed person. And we have conferences that are virtual and in person, Camp Widow. We have regional groups that meet in Canada, US, and Ireland. And now that we're in a virtual world, people can join any one of our 75 virtual groups in those 3 countries. Or, like you're in New Zealand, so you could pop on the call with the Ireland guys, or you could pop on with Canada or anybody. Yeah. So we offer many programs to support the widowed community. And so I keep busy with Soaring Spirits.
Wonderful. No surprises that you've taken on that role.
Well, I feel indebted to this organization. They really helped save me. I believe that we heal in community, and Soaring Spirits International is a massive community of widowed people helping each other. So I love working for this organization. Currently, we're raising money because we have outgrown our budget. we have widowed people coming to us from all over the world. And so we need to find donors, and we need to find people to actually help the nonprofit so that we can serve more widowed people. So I keep very busy with Soaring Spirits. And then the other project I'm involved with is a virtual mental health platform called Circles. It's circlesup.com. And Circles Up started last year during the pandemic. They saw a need to help people all over the world with affordable mental health in a virtual setting. So once a week, I run a group for, right now it's for, we have a small group of widowed people who come to take my A2z Healing Toolbox class on the circlesup.com platform. But Circles runs workshops for groups of 8 people or less. So small groups, it's $25 per class. In the US, you would spend $200 for 1 hour of therapy, but you can pay $25 for 1 week, and you're in a small, intimate group with others who understand. Maybe you've had a miscarriage. Maybe you have anxiety and depression. Maybe you are a bereaved parent. There are groups for everybody. So it's a wonderful platform, and people can access circlesup.com anywhere in the world.
Oh gosh, that sounds incredible. Oh yes, and so good to have this information for our listeners to have access to. This is why I love doing this podcast, because there are so many snippets of information that are so valuable that we're just not hearing about, especially if we're just left to our own devices. So I'm very, very grateful for you sharing this. And of course, I could keep talking to you for hours on this, because I know you have so much wonderful information to share. But I think, we're just going to run a little bit short on time. So let's finish up with, what is the best thing that's happened in your day today or this week?
Well, Jacob is my son. He's 13 now. He was 5 when his father died. And every day I pick him up from school. He's actually at school in person here. And I hear about his day, and I hear how he's thriving, and I hear about his friends. And he's a typical 13-year-old who's doing extraordinarily well. So he's the joy in the day, to be able to have this conversation with you and reflect back 8 years ago and what a hot mess we both were, to now, 8 years later, I'm able to reach a hand back and help others. And my son is thriving. I could not ask for anything more.
Oh, that is so beautiful. That warms my heart. That does, because, our children are our future, and it's so important to make sure that they are well catered for during this process as well. And you've done a fantastic job. He's very lucky to have you as his mum. So what is your go-to if your day is not going well, if it's turning to custard? What do you do to get through it?
I love that question. I'm a huge exerciser. So if I had to pick 2 A2z tools, I would go first to S, which is slide into exercise, and then U, which is utilizing nature. I'm a hiker, I'm a kayaker, I have a paddleboard. Anything outdoors that gets me moving just clears my head. It allows me to think and actually listen. I get lots of Brent messages outside. We had a life together that involved a lot of water time, ocean time, kayak time. And so that's what I do when my day's stressful. Yeah. I make sure I exercise.
Really good advice, because it just removes all the clutter. And when you remove the clutter, you can hear. Yeah, so fantastic. Now, your 3 takeaways.
Well, my 3 takeaways. Number 1, healing in community. If people can find a like-minded community, that will make all the difference. It could be, I'm widowed, but I could hang out with bereaved parents and they get me. It doesn't matter who it is, But healing in community, I believe, is such an important and a key.
Yeah.
Number 2 takeaway, I call it following the breadcrumbs. Once your person has died, I believe that they guide us in the spiritual sense. And so I believe that Brent has been in a collaboration with God, or some people say universe, tossing down breadcrumbs for me to follow. And I trust that. I trust the breadcrumbs. I've been led to you. I've been led to people that helped me publish a book. I've been led to amazing therapists that have helped my son and I. Those are the breadcrumbs. And so I would say, follow the breadcrumbs. Your heart knows where they are, and if we kick and scream and fight against the breadcrumbs, we're not going to be on the path that we were meant to be on. Yeah. And number 3, if people can find a peer mentor. I believe peer mentors are so invaluable. And that could be one other person who's a little bit ahead of you in the journey of grief and trauma, healing. I know for me, I was at the gym when my husband died, and I met a woman who was also widowed, young, with 2 children at home. And she was 4 years ahead of me in this journey. And I didn't say, hello, will you please be my peer mentor? But that's what happened with us. Yeah. And to this day, we're amazing friends. And I have been able to watch her 4 steps ahead to see how this goes. How do I say this? How do I alter my new life? And she was always there to reach a hand backwards or sideways. And now we walk together. But there's such power in having a peer that you can turn to.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's very, very beautiful too. Yeah. Just, somebody who gets you, you don't have to explain. Sometimes you are what you are and they get it. Yeah. Very important to have that person alongside of you. Susan, what an absolute pleasure it has been to speak with you today, and for you to share your A to Z with us. That is going to be a valuable resource for our listeners, I am sure. So I'm very appreciative of you sharing that with us. And of course, those 5 wonderful positive pillars of trauma, to, have a completely different look on that. So what can I say except, a very heartfelt thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Helen. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Wonderful. All right. So done and dusted. Well done. That was
Yay!
cool. I enjoyed that. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode today, feel free to share it with others. Hit the subscribe button so you can be notified of each weekly episode. Also, rate and review, especially if there is more you want to know that perhaps we didn't have time to touch on today. And if you are after resources to help you out on this journey, head to healingtobeyou.com and check those out there. So until next time, be kind to you, and thank you for joining us on the beautiful side of grief.